Hello everyone, Melanie here with CGL Recruiting, and today we're going to be talking about some research we did to increase your chances of getting a role with Apple. Now, we've done these types of videos before where we looked at Tesla and helped you to get in and see what's the best things of what Tesla's looking for. So let me explain what we've done with this one with Apple. So what we did is we went off and looked at all of the job descriptions that Apple currently has open, and we're recording this. It took us a while to do all the research, so it's June, July 2020. And what we did is we looked across all of the teams they have set up, all of the job descriptions, and tried to synthesize that data down. So you will know what are the key things that they are looking for across all of these different areas. Now, how does that help you as a job seeker? Well, it definitely helps you know what keywords you need to have on your resume and or LinkedIn profile in order to get pulled up in searches done by Apple. It also lets you know if there's skills that you're missing if you want to be considered to be working in a certain segment or team of Apple. And then the last thing it does is if you are fortunate enough to get an interview with Apple, it helps give you an up because you're gonna know what type of questions they're gonna ask on the core competencies for each one of these areas. So this is a lot of data, but they have so many positions open. We synthesized it down as much as we could, but I'm gonna warn you, this video is a little bit of a long one. But I promise you, it is great information, so stick with me to the end. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing that now. If you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, Melanie Woods at CGL Recruiting, connect with me now as well. We do great tips for job seekers. And then also ring that bell for notifications. And if you find this data helpful, give me that thumbs up in the end. Okay, let's take some time and walk into working at Apple. The information I'm going to show you about Apple, we've tried to place a lot of it on slides. So you can pause this video if you want to and capture some of the information. It'll make it much easier if you're targeting a certain area to be able to say, oh, they're wanting those 4 software skills. Great, let me target and do those down. Now, I do want to say in general, I love Apple products. And in fact, our videos are all recorded using an Apple iPhone 11. But, oh my goodness, Apple, your site for job seekers needs some work. It definitely is not the easiest site to navigate. It's even a little tricky to get to from their home page. If you're looking for it, you have to go on that home page and arrow down all the way to the very bottom, and you're gonna see it down by the bottom right under job opportunities. Now, I do want to talk about the way that Apple segments their jobs, which again is not easy. They're so good about making all of their software, their iPhones and the Mac computers and stuff so user-friendly, and they've missed it a little bit on their job posting site. So what they've done is they've segmented these different jobs into what we normally would consider like departments within a company, but they're calling it teams. And the way that they've done it, you think you would go to one place to look for like engineering jobs or one place to look for support jobs. It's not quite that easy. Let me walk you through now what are the different team areas that Apple separates their positions into. So there's a group of teams, like I said, that they separate into. The first one is machine learning and artificial intelligence, then hardware, software and services, design, operations and supply chain, marketing, corporate functions, Apple retail, sales and business development, support and service, and lastly, they have one called students. Now, for each one of these teams, we're going to go through, I'll show you the number of positions open at the time that we did this research. What are some of the most common job titles you're going to see under each of these areas? And then we're going to dig into a little bit about what type of educational requirements are in this type of job titles that we're seeing in this area. The most common majors in the education. We'll go through the IT requirements, and then we're going to talk about the core competencies that Apple, across all the job descriptions in that team segment, what they're looking for. Let's dig into the first one. The first one we're going to take a look at is machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now they've split this segment up into 4 areas, which I have listed for you here. And generally, when we looked at all the positions, there was a total of 291 positions available in this area. The vast majority of the positions can be kind of looked at as being in the following job titles. There were lots of strategy positions, a ton of engineers, and every type of engineer you could actually imagine. Software, reliability, build engineers, data engineers. There were lots of data scientists in these roles. There were also designers, scientists, and even conversation writers looking more at Siri and the AI. Now, when we looked at educational requirements across their machine learning and AI team, you better get your game on with your education, because most of these positions actually wanted a PhD or at a minimum a master's degree. There were some that were willing to take a bachelor's with 5 years of added experience, and there were some that did say or equivalent experience, but the vast majority were very, very heavy on the educational requirements across this segment of Apple. Now, the educational areas that they seem to focus on were in machine learning, robotics, statistics, computer science, general engineering, business analytics, and image processing. So if you are still in school and you're looking at targeting Apple as a future employer, these are the type of degree programs that seem to be the most that we found across all of the job descriptions in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now, because of the type of team segment that this is, the IT requirements that they were looking for were very, very broad. Of course, things like Python and C++ were heavy on here, but so were things like R and SQL, of course, and Linux. So this, I realize, is a lot of data, but again, if you need to, pause this video and you can look at some of these different software and see if these are ones that you have or key skills that you're going to want to add if you're interested in joining Apple's machine learning and AI team. Across these core competencies, the ones that showed the most were things like creative and curious with a bias to action, the ability to work with cross-functional teams, and to drive quality and consistency. There also was a lot of information out on them about being detail-oriented and ambitious that actually came up using a variety of different words across a large number of these positions. There also was a definite push for individuals that were focused with the ability to prioritize and manage heavy workloads. And it's also very evident that they're looking for people that are very results oriented and adaptable with a positive attitude. Okay, so again, how do these core competencies help you if you're looking for a position at Apple? Well, one, I would definitely include some of these core competencies in your cover letter. And if you don't think you should have a cover letter, please go off and watch our video on cover letters. And I also think you should consider including some of these in your resume. If you need a video on resume, we have one that'll take you through the 2020 resume format that will get you past the applicant tracking systems. But also think about these core competencies, as these are questions that Apple is very likely going to ask you if you go in there for an interview, or even if you're doing a phone interview. So let's take one of them. One of them that we saw come across a lot was the ability to be adaptable. So what Apple will most likely do is ask you a behavioral-based question on these different core competencies like adaptable. Let's do one of those right now. So they may say, tell me about a project that you worked on in one of your past positions where you had to be adaptable. What was your goal and how did you have to adapt that goal in order to still be successful? So by knowing these core competencies in advance and getting a chance to practice and think through your head what will be those type of behavioral-based interview questions you're going to get, will make it so much better for you in the interview. You're not going to have to think about all these things on the fly. You'll be able to have already rehearsed in your head, and it will come off a lot better because it'll be easier in the flow from you to the person that's interviewing you. Let's keep going and look at some of the other areas within Apple of the teams that they have. The next team we're going to look at is hardware, and there are a lot of different sub-segments that are available in hardware. Of course, there's lots of them that are engineering and design focused, but there was also some that still even seemed to go over into machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this is one of those areas that we were talking about that Apple, I wish you were organizing this data a little bit easier for job seekers. But let's keep moving on. Under the hardware segment, there were over 600 positions available, with the vast majority of those being engineers and designers. There were a huge number, though, of data analysts and specialist positions as well. And as data analytics becomes more and more important to the workforce in general, Apple seems to be very well poised to take advantage of individuals with those skills. We did see some other positions like architects, scientists, physicists, and even some lab roles that were available. The education requirements were a little different of this segment compared to the last one we looked at. A greater number were willing to take only bachelor's degrees, though some did want a PhD or master's degree. There were some as well that did say or equivalent experience. There was only one role, however, that we did find for a model maker, which was the only one that only required a high school degree. Now, on the educational areas of focus, for engineering, most often they were looking for those in electrical engineering, but there were also requirements out there on positions for engineering degrees like computer science, as well as material science, vision science, systems, neuroscience, and then of course, because there was a lot of data science positions or data analytics positions, they were also looking at individuals with a background in either data science or statistics. Now for the hardware segment, when we looked at the IT requirements, a lot of them were similar. I mean, Python, C++ again came up, and they pretty much came up in almost every team segment we looked at. Some of the other things that are out here that they did look at was like Swift, Logic, Pro Tools, and Perl, as well as MATLAB. So this, again, pause this video if you need more time to look at some of these. If you are applying for a position with Apple in their hardware area and you have any of these skills, make sure that they're on your resume. And if you don't have some of these skills, these may be ones that you want to consider adding in order to be considered by Apple. Now, some of the core competencies in the hardware area, it was a very, very heavy focus on collaboration and leadership, as well as people that were flexible and adaptable, not only with people, but also with technology. There was a huge push for great communication skills, and there was also a lot of data in here about individuals that were able to have a track record of on-time delivery. That was something that we saw across several of the different jobs. There also, I want to make sure that we definitely cover, in a lot of the positions that were posted, we saw that they wanted people that were proactive and passionate. They really are looking for those type of engineers and people focused on hardware who have a passion for what they do. And then there was also, lastly, a lot of information on those asking for project management expertise. So the hardware area was, of course, very focused on engineers, absolutely. But we saw the exact same thing in the next team area that we're going to look at, which is software and services. Let's dig into that one right now. For software and services, they again had a lot of sub-segments that they broke the jobs down into. And again, you're going to even see that machine learning and AI here. Now, when we looked at the positions overall, there were over 600 in this segment. Again, lots of engineers, also again, lots of data scientists. This area also had a lot of technical writers, developers, and more project and product managers than we saw in the hardware area. There were also some technicians and QA roles available. Now, the vast majority of the positions in this area only required a bachelor's degree. There were some occasional ones that were a master's degree, but most were very strong on just a bachelor's degree. There were a couple of roles that were only high school degree requirements. Those tended to be more of like the lab technicians. But we did see in this segment on several positions quotes like, "We're looking to hire at all experience levels." And this is something that someone took the time to write in, which is great. I'm glad that Apple is truly willing to look at a wide, diverse group of experience level for these roles. Now, the educational areas of focus for the positions that did want this bachelor's degree, again, most of them were wanting electrical engineers, though of course there was much higher of a push on those with a computer science background, or also mathematics or business information and systems. And the data warehouse and business intelligence degrees were mainly on the positions that were data scientists. Now, in regards to software, hardware, IT requirements, again, we're seeing a lot of the same ones. They were definitely wanting people with SQL and with Python and Java and C, but there was also a bigger focus this time on individuals knowing and understanding iOS and macOS, which of course is what we would expect from those working in the software and services area. Core competencies for this area, many times we saw the individuals have to have the ability to manage multiple projects with multiple collaborators or across a wide variety of teams within Apple. There was also a definite push in this segment compared to hardware for the individuals to have an empathy for users. And that is really trying to put themselves in that position of the individuals utilizing the software and making sure that it is something that's going to work for them to get great customer relations. There was a push for high standards of quality and the ability to explain complex ideas and designs very clearly. There was also a definite fast-paced, highly collaborative, aggressive deadlines type of focus within the software and services area. And there was also a lot of places where we saw things where they were wanting people to be more independently driven. Now, they still are looking for team players and people that can work across, but they definitely had a focus here on those that were independently driven. So the next team segment that Apple has is design, which a lot of the positions between hardware and software and design were like this. And I'm not sure how they actually decided to post one under one area or another because there was, again, a lot of overlap. But let's look at the segment areas underneath design. In the design area, there were 3 segments that they separated the positions into, and that is industrial design, communications design, and human interface design. There was only about 65 positions globally available in this area, and the positions were what you would normally expect, like product designers, design producers. There were a lot of conversation writers, and remember we saw some of these earlier on in some of the other segments. There was also art directors, creative directors, and some graphic designer roles in here. Most of these positions for education just were looking at a bachelor's degree. Very few mentioned wanting a master's degree, but several of the positions had an additional requirement that applicants must have a full portfolio. And so if you are wanting to apply in the design area within Apple, you better get your portfolio up and looking fantastic. Which if you're doing a portfolio, again, remember as we're looking at all these different skills and such, you might want to showcase some of your skills in those areas. Now, again, for educational areas of focus, while they wanted bachelor's degrees, most of them actually did not specify a degree in what. Those that did, there was a couple for graphic design, a couple for media arts, and a couple electrical engineers, but mainly it was just requiring some type of bachelor's degree. The IT requirements, of course, were far less in this area than we saw underneath the engineers. They were looking for things like Photoshop, Illustrator, Sketch, Keynote, not a very large or a huge list that we were able to glean out from this. Now, from the design core competencies area, there was a definite shift. What we saw was things like ability to create order from disorder, and individuals that were still self-motivated and proactive, but they also wanted individuals that were outstanding facilitators and presenters. And when we looked at the job duties, there definitely was that presenting across the different teams within Apple, which is, I'm sure, where this core competency came from and why it kept getting highlighted. They were also looking for people that were creative, those creative innovators, still with that very, very heavy customer focus. And there was a definite lean towards those that were meticulous with their attention to detail. And of course, in this area, as to be expected, in almost, I would say, at least 75% of the descriptions, there was a clear want for a passion for Apple products from the individuals in this design space. Now, I hope you can already see just how much data is out there. This is very difficult, I know, for you as job seekers to be able to absorb when you're looking at just thousands and thousands of job descriptions and trying to glean out this information. So I know we're going through a lot of data on this video, but stick with me. I promise you, if you are looking at Apple and they have a lot of roles available, this data is definitely going to help you. Let's move on to our next team area. Looking at operations and supply chain team area, there was a lot of sub-segments, and some of them, again, you're going to see a lot of overlap from ones that we looked at earlier underneath the positions. For example, this is where they have business intelligence and analytics. There also were areas that you would expect, like procurement, quality engineering, and also retail and e-commerce fulfillment. So underneath this segment, there were 242 positions available, lots of program managers, planners, procurement, like you would expect. Again, a huge set of data scientist type roles. There were engineers as well, but these are much more focused, like manufacturing engineers, quality test, process, all those operational focused engineer positions. And then there were, of course, product manager, and this is where the fulfillment roles within operations were. Now, the education requirements in general, they were still looking at a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience. Again, there were some that wanted that master's. They almost all said, if you have relevant experience, you are encouraged to apply. And I do want to point out there were a huge number of positions where they were requesting Six Sigma and other quality certifications. So it's definitely going to be something that you're going to want to highlight if you're wanting to get into Apple's operations and supply chain functionality. Now, going further on, when we looked at the educational areas of focus, underneath that engineering area, the ones that came up the most were those that had a focus in plastics, or else those electrical engineers and mechanical engineers. But they did also want individuals with degrees in statistics, computer science, supply chain, business, and finance. Now, I would have thought supply chain would have been a little higher on this list, but believe it or not, it was not. A lot of the supply chain focused roles, they still wanted that engineering focus. Now, when we looked at the IT type of requirements, again, the same things. It's obvious that they use SAP within their operations because they were looking for SAP power users. So no, if you're applying in this area, you need to get your SAP skills up as far as you possibly can. The core competencies in this area was very, very focused around problem solving and troubleshooting, really wanting to not stop the operations or get interruptions in supply chain. So we did see this continuously. They did also want individuals that were able to network broadly, drive collaboration, and that were very process or systems oriented. They also were definitely looking more towards individuals that could drive teams towards consensus, which is great, Apple. I love to see that within here. And then there was a heavy focus on wanting individuals that were able to think strategically and execute tactically. Okay, so again, let me remind you how you could use these core competencies. Let's say that you do get an interview with Apple and they're going to ask you behavioral-based questions on some of these core competencies. Like, let's say, for example, on the drive multi-oriented teams towards consensus. A very common question could be is, Tell me about a time where the company you were working for had to make a decision and you were part of that decision-making process. How did you approach it, and how were you able to get to a decision that worked for the business as a whole? They're looking for you to talk through your past behaviors and performance, as it's the best indicator for your future performance and behaviors. Okay, let's keep going and move on to the next team. The next team we're going to move on to is marketing. Now, there were only 4 segments underneath marketing: services, product, marketing communications, and corporate communications. Now, in the marketing area, there was 163 positions available. They had lots of positions that they deemed as producers. There was product marketing managers, artist relations, business managers, again, lots of writers and editors, and marketing managers. The education requirements were usually a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience. There were some that preferred a master's, but it was definitely not the norm. And about half said that they would take equivalent work experience in place of a bachelor's degree. Now, they did not generally specify an educational area of focus. There were a couple that did, and those that did were looking for things like marketing, computer science, communications, business, and analytics. But in general, it just said BA/BS required or BA/BS preferred. Now, when we looked at the IT, again, SQL, R, Python, man, if you want to work for Apple, those are 3 skills you're going to want to have regardless of which area you're in. And then there were a couple others that did come across on several of them, like Photoshop, Lightroom, and Final Cut Pro. Core competencies in the marketing area. They are looking for people that were very highly analytical. This is not always what we see in core competencies when we're looking at the marketing area. There is usually a much bigger focus on those that are creative innovators, and this was not. They were definitely focused, highly analytical, but they did also put in that intellectually curious. There was, of course, a high focus on communication, visualization, and articulation skills, as well as individuals that could work in a fast-paced environment and be able to prioritize the different projects that they're working on. There also was a lot of emphasis put on an extreme attention to detail and the ability to self-audit one's work. Okay, I know it's lots of data, but still hang with me, because the next team area we're going to get to is corporate functions. So the corporate function team had a crazy wide variety of positions. Now, unfortunately, this made this much more difficult for us to glean information, but I am going to cover some areas with you. Now, of course, this is where they had, their IT, legal, HR, finance, as well as things even like their dining and food services. So there were 168 positions available, and the roles were so very varied. I do recommend you check through this area regardless of your area of focus though, because there were even some engineer roles underneath this corporate function area. Now, the educational requirements, the bachelor's degree or equivalent experience was still what we saw the most. Some preferred a master's, and there were 1 or 2 roles here and there with no requirements at all. Now, I have to tell you, when we went through this corporate functions area, there were some weird requests. And an example of one of those is requesting a CPA for an accounts payable analyst. That is not a market competitive requirement. And in my mind, they are asking for something that is not needed in order for somebody to be successful in that area. Moving on now to their IT requirements, they were mainly looking at Pages, Keynote, Microsoft Excel, and SAP as the key skills in this area. I do want to point out, though, that many of the positions in their corporate functions, they were really looking for people that were bilingual or trilingual. And it wasn't just, English, Spanish, English, Portuguese. It was a wide variety of languages that they had there, that they were really looking for people that are multilingual. Underneath the corporate functions, the core competencies that did come out across the positions pretty consistently, is the ability to build and maintain relationships, have high emotional intelligence, be proactive, and the ability to influence and motivate others without having authority. Another thing that I thought was brilliant that was out there was they were looking for individuals that were deeply concerned about excellence and perfection in products and services. That is a compelling statement, Apple. So the next two teams I want to cover together because, oh my goodness, it was hard to tell where one started and one stopped. And that was Apple Retail and Apple Sales and Business Development. There were the identical positions under both of those teams. And so you're really going to have to look at both of those if you're interested in working in one of the Apple retail stores or in their sales and business development area. Let's take a look at those two teams right now. Focusing first in on the Apple retail team section, there was 3 areas: sales, support, and leadership. Now there were 478 positions available, which is pretty amazing at the time that we did this research because June and July of 2020 was not the best of economic times. And so the fact that they still have that many positions in their retail areas with all of social distancing, I was actually pretty amazed at. So some did want a degree under the Apple retail area, but most did not, or at least did not specify it on the job descriptions. And they were across the board all about customer service and the fact that individuals must be flexible and must be passionate about Apple products. Now, under the sales and business development team, again, we saw a lot of the similar positions that we did in the other Apple retail team. They were definitely positions like business development, Apple Store sales, sales planning and operations, account management, retail partner sales, and field and solutions engineering. That's how they separate out all of these job descriptions. Now, why they didn't include Apple Store sales under the Apple retail, I am not really sure, but that's the choice that they made. Now, when we looked in this area, there were 399 positions available. There were things like product managers, marketing managers, business development, sales trainers, and operations experts. But a lot of those were actually roles that were obviously in an Apple retail store. Now, again, education for this area, most did not require a degree, and those that did were very open in looking at equivalent experience. Core competencies, very similar to the Apple retail, looking at listening, influencing, negotiation, customer service skills. And the only real difference I saw in the core competencies in this area was that awareness and understanding of business needs. So in looking at those two teams, again, it was difficult because the positions were very much like this. And you're going to see that some in the next team we're going to look at too, which is support and service. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some differences, but if they're all in the retail stores, the positions, I think it could have been a lot easier for job seekers for them to know that and take those that were not in the retail stores and pull them out a different way. Let's move on to the next segment, which is support and service. In the support and service segment, they separated it into 5 areas: online support, Apple Store support, service channel management and operations, technical support and customer support, and Apple Care business development. Now, there were 246 positions available in this area, and this is where, for those of you that have been in the Apple stores, that Genius role that they have with the Genius bar in the back, those type of roles were in here. They're technical specialists, they're creative roles, business pro, customer relations, lots of roles that are in the Apple retail stores. Now, there were some of them, of course, were obviously remote too, where they were providing phone support. And there were some product managers and some engineers again as well. The education requirements, there were some that wanted a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience, but most had no requirements listed for a degree. The core competencies, this is where we started to see, of course, that interrelations with customers coming in, where they did want people with the ability to deal well with conflict. And that's because a lot of these roles were like the Genius Bar and people that are coming in with a problem that these people are going to have to, of course, help fix or try to get to the best solution possible. So they were looking for strong people skills, strong problem solving and troubleshooting. And another thing that was kind of different that they were looking for is the ability to instruct in a hands-off manner, which is, of course, if you've ever been in an Apple store, what they definitely try to do to empower you. So there was one other team segment where they had jobs, and that team was titled Students. And it had lots of internship roles and great positions available, but most of the roles were actually just duplicates of roles that were in other areas, but were internships or ones that were just for students to get into the retail area or other places. So we are going to cover other videos that'll have intern and student positions because it's something you all have definitely been requesting from us. But if you are looking for that type of internship, they do have you covered and have that in that one segment. So overall for Apple, what did we learn? Well, the first thing is, if you are looking at going after any type of engineering position within Apple, you better get your game on because they are definitely looking for advanced degrees, and there were a lot of mentions across the job descriptions of academic excellence. So your GPA is going to matter for Apple. It was something that came up consistently. I also think that you really need to be able to show what you've done outside of your education. We saw a lot of the positions that were looking for people that were passionate about the types of products and things they were working on. So if you really want to get looked at really well within Apple, I recommend you have a portfolio and you come up with some design ideas or thoughts or research that you've done into their different areas. It will go a long way. So I hope this information was helpful to you. If there's other companies that you would like us to do a similar analysis, please put it in the comments down below. Now, it takes us a while to do these because when you're looking at thousands of job descriptions and to synthesize that data, it's not something that we can get out in a couple days. But put it on our list by putting it in the comments below, and we'll do our best to get to it as quick as we can. And remember, give me that thumbs up if you feel like this information was helpful. Thanks, and I will see you next time.